this is BioPhoenix here, and today's video is going to be another request video that has been a long time coming, and this one was requested to me by Terry309, and the game that he requested me for today is a PS1 game, and it is called Shaolin, but in Japan it is known as Lord of the Fist, Fellowship of the Punching Bag. Nah, I'm just kidding about that subtitle part. So this game was developed by Polygon Magic, and it was published by THQ in Europe, and it came out in the year 1999 for both Japan and Europe. Very surprising that this game was not released in North America. I mean, usually whenever there's a game that comes out in both Europe and Japan, it always happens to be a simple series game, but thank fucking god this is not one of those things. So yes, this is mostly a fighting game, but it is also considered as a RPG, if you could believe it. And there is one little part of it that does remind me of a beat 'em up, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But first, let's talk about the game modes within this game. So you have Versus mode, which allows you to play against a computer or with a friend of yours, and believe it or not, this game can actually play up to 8 players. Holy shit, 8 players for a fighting game? I didn't think that was even possible for a PS1. But unfortunately, since I don't have 8 frickin' controllers, I couldn't test this out. But I would imagine it'd be pretty fucking chaotic. But anyways, I don't really think I need to explain Versus mode since it's basically in every fighting game ever. And there is also a time attack mode, but you have to unlock it by beating every single story within the game. And then as for the main course, we got the actual story mode. But before talking about the game's story, this game does have 6 unique movesets that you get to pick. So there's the Shaolin style, Jet Kwon-Do, Tai Chi, Extreme Fist, Hungar, and Drunken Boxing. So you can pick playing as either a boy or a girl, and then you select the style that you want, and depending on the style that you pick, it actually changes up the story. For an example, if you pick the Hungar style, you start off in a giant temple where your main objective is that you have to find a girl to accompany you. But if you pick the Extreme Fist style, you actually start off in a town that's very poor, but at the same time, you're actually playing the role as a bad guy. Funny enough, when I first played this game, that was the one that I picked, and I was really confused as to why everyone was treating this little girl like shit. So yeah, starting off with that one is pretty tough because everyone just hates your guts and just wants to kill you. But I gotta say, that's actually pretty fucking cool that this game does have many different stories depending on the styles that you pick. So when you start off in story mode, it plays like a top-down view with some tank controls. And you just gotta walk around the town, talk to people, and of course you also get to fight people, and there are gonna be times where people will try to jump you. So in every town, there is a inn where you get to save your game, and it refills your endurance. But there is also a restaurant that you get to go to, and that one will heal your vitality whenever you get hit within a fight. In every town, you can order many different foods, and in fact, one of the foods you can get in this game is monkey brains, because, yeah, that has to be delicious, right? And then there is a dojo arena, which allows you to fight many different opponents. So in this game, you do gain EXP after every fight, and you do level up, and every time you level up, depending on what you do throughout your fights, it does gain up different stats, like there's strength, then there's defense, then there's max HP, and finally, speed. And one interesting aspect in this game is that as time goes on, your character does grow older. And the older you get in this game, the more special attacks you get to acquire. And depending what you eat throughout the game will change your appearance. So I wonder what would happen if he ate nothing but monkey brains. Well anyways, the main objective to the story is, like I already said, it depends on the different styles that you picked. But it usually consists of trying to go to the dojos and try to kick everyone else's asses. And then you move on to the next town and you gotta kick all their asses. So that's all I gotta say about the story mode, and wow, all I gotta say is that I'm actually very impressed with how ambitious this is. I mean, the only game I can think of off the top of my head that is kinda similar to this would be Tobal No. 1, but even that's not 100%. So now let's get moving on and start talking about the game's controls, and let's talk about the action parts first. So the game's combat does control pretty well, so it does respond well, and the hit detection is pretty good. But the button layout does take some time to get used to. So X is punch, circle is kick, square is guard, And the triangle button is a little bit strange because it allows you to attack in like multiple directions, except in front of you. If you're in front of someone, you can actually grab them, but it's like a counter grab sort of thing. R1 is jump, and then L1 changes targets, and then holding L2 charges your attack, and when you do this, you get to do a special attack. So this game's fighting is very simplistic and doesn't really have a whole lot of in-depth combos and movesets you get to do, and that's kind of the reason why I do find that the fighting in this game does kind of feel more like a beat-em-up, more like a 3D beat-em-up. And I don't consider that to be a bad thing, although I can see some people not liking it as much since it is something that does get repetitive. But since I do like many different beat-em-ups, it is something that I do kind of like myself, but it is definitely not amazing. But there's no major complaints when it comes to the action, like there's no like slowdowns, there's no glitches, there's no like poorly hit detections, nothing like that, so that's always good. Now as for the controls for the story mode, well unfortunately this one is not as good. Now the game does have tank controls, and for this kind of game and with this viewpoint, it's really a pain in the ass to get to where you need to go. And like I said many times before, I don't mind tank controls within survival horror games. But since this is not a survival horror game, and the fact that it's in a top-down view, it does take some time to get adjustment to, but one thing that is kinda helpful is the fact that if you press L2, it actually does zoom out a bit, and doing this is a little bit helpful for that you can actually see more, but sadly you can't move around like this. So if you're not familiar with an area, you gotta keep pressing L2, and then you gotta get out of it, then you gotta walk forward, and make sure you don't run into any walls. So yeah, unfortunately the game's navigation isn't that great, but it's definitely not the worst that I've ever seen. I mean, this is miles better than Vampire Hunter D on PS1, good god. So now let's get moving on to the other things, like the graphics. And the graphics in this one are just kind of okay. But I will say, if you are familiar with other fighting games that Polygon Magic made, like Fighters Impact, and then there's Versus, this game does look a lot better than those. But as its own, it does look like an okay game, it's just, I don't know, I think some of the character designs are kind of ugly and generic. Especially the male character that you select throughout the story. He looks like a naked mole rat. I really wish in this game you can have like a character creation option. It doesn't have to be super in-depth, but at least be able to change something, because good god, his hair is just fucking stupid ass looking. But as for the different settings that you go to throughout the story mode, they look okay. Nothing too mind-blowing, but at least it does look alright. But I guess one thing that is at least worth noting about the characters is that they actually have boob physics in this game, taken from DOA. So at least there is that, but yeah, other than that, the graphics in this one, they're just okay. Not terrible, but also not great either. And of course, I'm looking at this for PS1 standards, since obviously I know, like, the graphics in this game hasn't aged well, but then again, what PS1 game hasn't that's in 3D? But I'm sure all of you should know this, that graphics are not everything. So anyways, now let's get moving on to the game's music. The game's music is pretty decent, not amazing, but it is pretty good enough and does the job just fine. But there is a couple tracks in the game that I do like quite a bit because they do sound very relaxing. And all the songs fit the settings really well, so I don't really have any real complaints about the music, even though I do find there is a couple songs that are a little bit forgettable, but it's not terrible by any means. So yeah, not too bad at all. So now, if you wanted to go out and buy this game, now like I said, the game was only available in Europe and Japan. So meaning that if you do want to import this one, you do have to have a way to play the game. But it is very good to know that this game is actually very cheap, a hell of a lot cheaper than I was expecting. So I've seen it go from about $6, $7, $10, $11, $12, $15, and the highest I've seen it for was about $25. But of course, that is a bit much, considering that there's like plenty of them out there that are way less than that. So yeah, it's good to know that this game is not terribly overpriced. So now, as for my overall thoughts on this game, Shaolin is actually a pretty enjoyable game. But as much as I did enjoy this game, it does have a few rough things about it, but I don't consider it to be bad by any means. So my only real major complaints with the game is really the game's navigation in the adventure mode, because having tank controls with a top-down view is just annoying as fuck. If they had to keep the tank controls, it would have been a lot better if they used pre-rendered backgrounds, and I know for a fact that Polygon Magic can do that because they actually made the game Galerians, which I did take a look at last year, and I ended up really liking it a hell lot. And another thing I have to mention is that this game has a lot of loading. Now, the loading isn't very long, but it does happen pretty frequently whenever you're going in and out of buildings or in and out of fights, but it's just one of those things that it does get kind of annoying after a while. And finally, I do wish that the game's combat did play more like an actual fighting game than a beat 'em up, but that's not a huge complaint for me, because I don't mind it playing like a beat 'em up, but like I said, I know some people might not like it as much. And like I already mentioned, the graphics and the music are not the most amazing thing ever, they're just kind of alright. But those are just minor things, but other than that, I really did like this game quite a bit. So for anyone out there that really likes martial arts and also really likes adventure games, I would recommend this one. I think it is at least worth a try. So whether you're playing it on an emulator first, or you want to go out there and get yourself a copy of it, at least it is a very cheap game, so even if you didn't like the game, at least you didn't pay like a crazy amount of money for it. But anyways, one last thing I will mention before we end it here is that, as much as I did enjoy this game, the game's concept is a lot more awesome than what the end product turned out, but the game is still enjoyable enough and I did have some fun with it. And there's not a whole lot of games out there that play very similar to this. Like I said, the only thing that comes to mind is Tobal number 1 and Tobal number 2. But it does make me wish that there was a spiritual successor that does play kind of similar to this game with the same concepts and such. I think that'd be great. But with that being said, I'm going to end things right here, so thanks for the request, Terry309, and of course, have yourselves a great day, and thanks for watching and commenting.
I'm not gonna fight you. I'm gonna kick your ass.